could teach every kid in the world one thing, what would you teach them?
To take advantage of their opportunities. There's lots of opportunities, and to live the best they can.
There's always something. Always the fact that you're alive. People are dead. Most people don't like you, but there are some people who do. Focus on the people who do.
We don't know about tomorrow. We know about yesterday and today. That's the day you live.
Have a good time, have fun. We all have. It's just a little slower now.
Don't take a first glance at a person and make up your opinion. If you dig a little bit, there's something in everyone that is interesting and exciting.
You love something, you have a goal, and you try your best to accomplish it. And that's what I say, make the most of every day. Every opportunity you have, grab it.
I have never found anything where I didn't have something positive. Focus on the humorous thing.
Sometimes you go through hardships and you have to go through them. And each day you have to make the best of it. And that's the way.
No one cares if you're going to cry. You accept it and let it roll off your back and go on your way. It's the way I've lived my life.
If you can give a helping hand, it goes a long ways.
Came across a story last week about a man who was involved in a fairly serious car accident. He had been driving along late at night when out of nowhere a car came from the side and plowed into him, and both cars flew into the ditch, and there's glass and metal flying everywhere. Miraculously, the man escaped unhurt. And as he was crawling out of his car, he noticed the other driver, a young, well-dressed woman crawling out of her car. After they finally freed themselves from the wrecked vehicles, he comes up to her and he asks her, are you okay? And she kind of checks, and miraculously, she appears to be completely unharmed. And she says, "This is unbelievable. I can't help but think this must have been God's will that we have both survived this terrible crash without a scratch." And what a coincidence. You're a good-looking guy. I'm a single woman. I can't help but think that it's God's will that we meet. And this is his way of introducing us. The man's flattered. He's in shock, but nonetheless, he's flattered. He's kind of nodding in agreement. And the woman turned to him and said, this must be a sign that we're to be friends and fall in love and spend the rest of our lives together. And the man replied, it could be. I think you might be right. And look at this, the woman exclaimed. Another sign. My car, even though it's completely demolished, but this bottle of vintage wine that I had in my trunk is unbroken. Surely it must be God's will that we drink this and celebrate our meeting together. So she hands him the bottle, and the man's so overwhelmed and overjoyed with what's happening, and he takes this big long swig and hands her the bottle, and she puts the cap on and hands it back to him. And he says, "What? You're not going to celebrate?" And she goes, "No, I think I'll just wait for the police." Well, good morning. My name's Garry. This place is never boring, that's for sure. I'm one of the pastors here. Really glad you're here with us this morning as we continue on in this series called There's an App for That, where the whole premise behind it is just how there are applications or apps that are designed for us that we can have on our devices to help make life simpler and easier. There are also apps found in the Bible, designed by the God who created you and created me, that help us in our everyday life. And last week we looked at a very simple but powerful way to overcome feelings of discontent that can easily have us focusing on the things that we don't have and pining for the things that we do. And if you missed that message, you can catch up online like you heard on the preview, or you can go on our app and catch up that way, and I'd encourage you to do that. Well, today we're going to explore something that, as a pastor, I hear this question all the time. I think it's something that we all struggle with. We all want to figure out the answer to, because if we can get this figured out, man, life would be so much simpler. It could save us a whole bunch of heartache, a whole bunch of hurt. It might even save us a bunch of money. Definitely save us a bunch of worry. And it's this. It's what many Christians refer to as discovering God's will for my life. Now, what is it God wants from me? And this question comes from people who want to just simply please God by avoiding making mistakes, making the wrong decision, and getting it just right. And they begin to worry because they're not sure what to do. And I've seen it come to the point where people are actually just so wrapped up with the worry they've lost all their peace of actually journeying with God. Because they're so afraid of making the wrong decision. And so before we get started, I just want to take just a couple of minutes to quickly provide some background, some framework for what is meant by God's will, because it's a huge topic and we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to break it down really quickly. And generally there are three types of will when it comes to God, three types of God's will. And the first that we learn about is often referred to as the providential will of God. And the providential will of God is this: God is going to do what he set out to do regardless of what anyone else says, does, doesn't do. He's already set it into motion and it's going to happen. So here's an example of that. God created the heavens and the earth. He created you and he created me. And he just did that. That was his plan. He said, this is what I'm going to do. And it just happened. Another one is after he created us, he looked down and he was like, wow, these guys are kind of a mess. I want to go down and rescue them. And so we put into motion this plan that he was going to come to this earth, become one of us, walk with us, and ultimately at Easter, the Easter story, die for us so we could have a way back to him. And he set that in motion. We didn't ask for it. We didn't earn it. He just did it. Okay, so that is a quick thumbnail sketch of the providential will of God, okay? The second type that we run into is the moral will of God. We're a little more familiar with this one. This has to do with the ethical boundaries that God has put in place, kind of like guardrails for our life to kind of keep us on track so we can experience the joy and the peace that he truly has for us. For example, things like don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't murder, that kind of stuff. Instead, God says, no, seek the good of others. Treat others how you would like to be treated. I love how this Old Testament prophet summarized what God has designed for us to live like. And he puts it so succinctly. Listen to this. He says, God has already made it plain how to live, what to do. It's quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. That is the moral will of God. And here's the thing. If you and I get this one right, even just some of the time, life won't only go better, we will also take a huge step forward into discovering and coming to grips with this whole question of what is it that God has for my life? What is his will for my life? Because in 99% of the cases, staying aligned with the moral will of God will help you and I make wise decisions. It's not like we pray and go, God, do you want me to lie and cheat on this test? Is that what you'd like me to do? Like, we just know, right? So that, in a nutshell, is the moral will of God. But that leaves 1%. And that's where we move into this realm of God's will that is called the personal will of God. And this is where we kind of get tripped up a little bit. And here's why I say that. The overarching theme in the Bible teaches that the God of the universe is a God of love, a God who cares for us, a God who wants to have a real, vibrant, intimate, and personal relationship with us, that a personal God, as he claims to be, would reveal his personal will for us to us. But often that's not how it goes down, is it? Often when we're facing important life decisions, it can seem as though God's kind of left us on our own. And I don't know about you, but when I'm facing a potentially life-changing decision, I want to get it right. Should I buy that house? Should I buy that car? Should I go back to school? And I don't think I'm alone. I mean, you guys are all brilliant people. We all want to make the right decision, right? And what better way than to let God in on the conversation? So we say things like, hey, God, what say you? Should I borrow the money for this business venture or this stock option? Should I buy that house or that condo, or should I just rent for a few more months? Should I take this job that's going to pay me more, but I might have to travel a lot more? Should I stay in this relationship, or is it just time to move on? Should we get married, or should we wait? Should I quit my job and go back to school? We pray prayers like those, but then nothing special or miraculous happens. It just feels as though God is, when we need him the most, he's just kind of left us on our own to figure it out. Now, wouldn't it be awesome if when we were faced with decisions like that, and we asked God for help, that he would, very clearly and in an audible voice, tell us what to do? Like we say, so God, what do you think? Should I take the job? And you just hear that voice that says, I wouldn't. You're like, oh, okay. Or, God, should we get married or should we wait? Get married. Or, no, run, Forrest, run. Depends. But wouldn't it be awesome if that's what happened? That's not what happens. It feels more like God's left the building. And he's left you and I alone trying to figure out what to do, which decision to make. And that's where we get confused, because we're thinking, I just don't know what to do, and you're not helping here. The question becomes, how can we discover God's will for our life when we need to make a decision and there's kind of a deadline to it? It's like, I got to make a decision here. Am I going back to school in September, or like, what should I do? But it seems like he's mum on the whole subject. Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because there's an app for that. It's a principle that's available to all of us that, if applied, that's the key, applying it, can help us discover God's will for us, which in turn will help us make wise decisions. And when I tell you what it is, when I share it with you, you're probably going to be sitting there going, well, wow, thanks, Tips. It's Captain Obvious at the front again. But here's the thing. Even because it's so obvious, it's something that we tend to just overlook, and we do not leverage it to our advantage. We know about it, shake our head, yeah, that sounds cool, and we don't do anything with it. Now, this app is found in the Old Testament in a book called Proverbs. If you've never, ever cracked the Bible open and read any book of the Bible, read Proverbs, because it's really easy to read. It's got these short, pithy statements, words of wisdom that state a general truth or a piece of advice that pertains to life and how to live it best, and it's fantastic. And I would really encourage you to read it. But here's the advice Solomon, the guy that wrote it, gives that, when followed, can help us make wise decisions and ultimately discover God's will for our life. And here it is. You ready? Get all the advice and instruction you can. We'll see you next week. I mean, it's obvious, right? It's just like, duh, thanks, dude. That really helped. Glad I came this morning. But here's the thing. Solomon mentions this several times throughout this book. And I think it's because we tend to overlook it. Nod our heads in agreement. Yeah, it sounds like a good idea, and we just don't do it. Here's how he puts it. He says, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. It's wise to seek counsel and instruction and advice, even for those who consider themselves wise, because wise people understand that the wiser you get, the more skilled at living life you become, the more good advice will benefit you. Put another way, it's like the wise get wiser. Have you ever stopped to think, I was thinking about this the other day, to think about the irony of world-class professional athletes having coaches, coaches that, are washed up. They never really were really super good at their sport, but yet these guys go to them for coaching, for lessons. I mean, why would they do that? Because professional athletes know something that wise people inherently know and understand. That you will never, ever be capable of all you're able to be unless you are open and willing to tap into the wisdom of the wise people around you. Wisdom that comes from only one thing: experience. That's it. That's where it comes from. And then be able and willing to listen and learn from it. Solomon stated the practice this way: walk with the wise and become wise. Surround yourself with wise people, and you'll become wise. But often we don't do that, do we? We try and figure things out ourselves. And have you ever noticed this? This is where it shows up a lot. Have you ever noticed that, why is it we trust our own feelings, we trust ourselves, we trust our intuition going into a relationship, whether that's a dating relationship, a marriage relationship, a business relationship, that going into those things, we don't seem to feel the need for counsel or instruction or advice. But most of us know what it's like to seek counsel on the back end of a relationship that's spinning out of control. That's when we turn to counselors and therapists and lawyers for advice when leaving those relationships. It makes you wonder how much of that could be avoided if we just slowed down, sought wise counsel on the front end before making decisions that led to the need for wise counsel on the back end. That's why we do premarital. It's so important. I was doing premarital with one couple, and the guy was completely freaked out because he thought my job was to tell them not to get married. He just had it in his head. He had heard that it's all about not getting married, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. The reason we do premarital is we want them to be as aware as they can of the marriage relationship. We want them to have the best friendship, the best marriage that they can have. And so we pour our wisdom into them and say, these are the pitfalls to look for. These are the things to celebrate. These are the things to just let water run off your back and just keep going. Walk with the wise and become wise. It's not like I got this all figured out. A few years ago, I found myself facing a decision that had the potential to lead me down two very different but equally good paths. And this is where the rub comes. If you have a decision to make, and this one doesn't seem that good and this one seems good, it's easy. I'm going to do this one. It's when they're both equally, it's almost like a win-win. I can't really lose. I could go this way. I could go that way. What do you want, God? And it's like crickets, right? So that's what it was I was facing. And here's the paths I had to choose from. One was to continue working here at the meeting place. The other was to take a job coaching executives at Boeing down in Seattle, traveling down a couple of times a month to train these executives in Boeing. And I had been asked by one of the coaches that trained me in my business coaching to join them, which totally blew me away because it was one of the coaches that actually trained me, and it was one that had a huge impact on my life. So I held them in very high regard, respected them, and the thought that they were asking me, wow, I was just like, oh, man, that means a lot. And I remember they said, we need an answer in a couple of weeks, so just think about it. Get back to us when you have an answer. And I remember hanging up the phone and sitting in my office and thinking, man, 10 minutes ago, I knew what I was doing. Now, I'm not sure what to do. Should I dive into this new opportunity? I mean, I've been working part-time at the church here for a while. And so I was asking myself, should I stay? Like the song says, should I stay or should I go? Was it time for me to move on to something new? And all these questions are running through my head. So needless to say, there was a lot to think about. And so I invited God in on the conversation. I sat at my desk and said, okay, God, what should I do? Give me some kind of an indication of what I should do here. And wouldn't you know it, this big beam of light shone in through the window, and out of that light, this voice said, here's what you should do. Actually, it's not what happened. Would have made a really cool story, though, right? What happened was pretty much the opposite. Except for the ticking of the clock on the wall of my office and the hum of the computer on my desk, it was complete silence. I didn't feel or sense a divine pull or push either way. I just had two options in front of me, and that was it. And so for the next few days, I just kept running all the scenarios through my head. Okay, what's the worst case scenario here? What's the worst case scenario here? And what's the best case scenario? And just back and forth, all inside my head, all to myself. And after a few days, I was no closer to knowing what to do than I was when I first started. And that's when I finally thought, you know what? I'm going to call somebody and see what they think. And so what I did is I called some men that are in this church, a couple that weren't, but men that I hold in high regard and respect. They're the type of people I look at and go, man, when I'm their age, I want to be where they're at. And so I phoned these men, I met with them one-on-one over coffee or talked with them on the phone, over and over again. And what happened for the most part is they would just ask me questions. And then they would just sit back and listen for my answer. And then they would ask more questions. The odd time they would share with me their experiences and say, I had a similar experience. This is what I did. This is what happened. But for the most part, they just asked me questions that helped me work it through. And what happened is, over the next few days, they helped me clear out all the clutter that was running through my head that was keeping me from seeing things clearly. And the wise choice, the best choice, became more and more obvious. And here I am. This stuff's not easy. James, the brother of Jesus, wrote in a letter that's attributed to his name. He said this, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without fault, and it will be given to you. You just have to ask. And so how does God give us wisdom? A lot of the time it's through other people that are on this journey of faith with us. And so I don't know where you find yourself this morning. Maybe you're here and you have those decisions staring you right in the face and you've been talking to God about it and it's just nothing is happening. I don't know what those decisions are, but here's my advice. Tap into and absorb as much wisdom from those around you that are further down the road and have experience. Tap into them. Ask them questions. Invite them out for coffee and say, this is what I'm up against. What do you think I should do? And then listen and put into practice what they say. Talk with people who are preferably further down the road in their faith journey than you are, who are willing, this is key, that are willing to say what needs to be said. Because oftentimes, I know in my experience, I will always seek out people that I'm pretty sure they're going to agree with me. It's like, I'm going to talk to that guy because I just know he's going to say, yeah, do it. But go to people that you know, they don't have that investment. It's just like, hey, I'm just looking out for the best in you, and this is what I think you should do. And it might not be what you want to do, but listen to what they have to say. Get all the advice and instruction you can, because it is often through the wise counsel of godly people that God speaks to us and reveals his will for our life. I'm so pumped to be on this journey with you. And I invite you to pray with me. God, sometimes it's a whole forest for the trees thing. We can't see the forest for the trees. And sometimes a principle like this, an application like this, is so close to us we don't even see it. But when we take a step back, it can be the very thing that helps us sort through those life decisions that we're facing that can change the trajectory of our life. And there's so many different scenarios. But we know that you're a God who cares for us, that loves us, that wants the best for us. And you've just chosen to work through people. You've given us each other so we can help and walk with each other. And so my prayer would be that we would all have the courage, when we're faced with those decisions, that we would just seek out the people that we know will give us the answers we're looking for. That they will press us in and say, this is what I think is the best for you. And then trust that that wisdom that they have is from walking with you, and they can share that with us. This place is full of people with stories and experience and wisdom. We'd be wise to tap into it. And we just thank you that we have each other. And we pray this in your name. Amen.